Astrology is a guidance discipline to trigger understanding, communication from the brain of an astrologer. Vocational profiling is exquisitely important, helping others find themselves, the most important service astrology can give another human being. Contact is more important in this process than the nature of an aspect or a sign. We really must learn about diseases and their symptoms. We have to recognize the symbology of the planets as they come down to Earth within the aging process. It is not our job to provide the answers to our questions. It is our job to use the question to stimulate protective, potentially fulfilling conversations. The impression we get from the horoscope registers within us, in our sensorium, and people feel that. Make no mistake, a matured astrology led by your brain is very powerful indeed. And perhaps our mantra should be, I want to be a good astrologer. I am a good astrologer. Give me the opportunity, world, to be a good astrologer. Today we're talking about medical astrology, and I want to preface it all by saying I am not a medical doctor. I'm a pretty good astrologer, and I've looked around and I've seen a lot. We're going to talk about systems, systemic. We're talking about organs in the body, somatic. We're talking about the phenomenon of how infrequently people get physical checkups. It's astounding. They spend years not going to a doctor. I think the young feel that they don't need it, and the older people are afraid to hear bad news. When you're 20 years old and something hurts, you can say, well, I'll take care of it in the morning, or I'll work it out. If you're 45, I say, well, gee whiz, if this doesn't go away in a week, I may have to go to a doctor, but I don't even know one. When you're 65 or 70, you say, that's it. I'm in trouble. Then what do? I have a friend who's a 94-year-old male. He is just entertaining beyond belief, interesting, conversationalist, plays the piano, sings songs in 3 languages. He's a marvelous hit of every party. Just recently, he was getting out of a swimming pool and he fell. We've all done that. But when you're 94 years old and you fall on the stones, you have a trauma. They took him to the emergency room, put him in a bed, and he told me, now he's out and active again, he said, I lay there, Noel, and I feared that I would be forgotten. I feared that I would develop pneumonia from just lying still. I knew my lungs would give out. I knew this was my way of going, leaving my life in 94 years behind. Well, those are normal thoughts when you get older. He's okay. But again, I was reminded how the dimension of age within systemic and somatic breakdown is vitally important. Sounds so simplistic, doesn't it? Well, I've been attesting to this phenomenon with the phrase accumulated developmental deficit. We accumulate developmental tension as we progress and grow in life. And within the aging process, it establishes a deficit upon the system. It blows up. It explodes. It causes problems. I remember having the eyes of a hawk. And then suddenly I came back from a vacation once and in Jamaica, and street signs were blurred. And I thought, too much sun. Well, it didn't clear up. I was 45 years old. Astrologically, I knew what was happening. I went to an eye doctor, and as I walked into the room and told him my symptoms, he says, "You're 45 years old, aren't you?" He knew. He understood perfectly. He smiled, put me at rest. He said, "This is perfectly normal." What is normal? What is normal is the system breaks down. No matter how keen you are on physical therapy, it will break down. And astrology can be extremely, extremely helpful. Now, within this idea of accumulated developmental deficit, we have to understand that tension is essential for growth. Think of the tension involved with a flower as it breaks through the crust of the earth to reach the sun. Think of the tension of your own being emerging into maturity in our society. Think of all those tough times that when you look back upon them, you see their value. Well, that'll put hair on your chest. What does that mean? That means you've become of age. All right. Now, the ancients taught astrology by taking what was above and putting it into the body. We've all seen those medieval drawings where fishes are swimming around your feet and a ram is going across your sinus area. We're going to approach it that way too. It's an orderly way to approach a complicated subject. Complicated because we really don't want to hear it. But it is simple and scary. And so I will give you many, many, many examples, but I'm not going to show you many, many, many horoscopes on this DVD. There'll be some later. But listen carefully. And in listening carefully, we can distill the essence of accumulated developmental deficit and the symbology of the planets and signs that relate to systems and organs within. Now, we all know that Aries suggests the head area. And this introduces the planet Mars, ruler of Aries. And when we have a lot of tension with Mars, we can expect there to be a history of headaches. Literally. And we're talking migraine headaches, which can be severely debilitating. Ask Whoopi Goldberg. She has a very challenging Mars in her horoscope that is peregrine. Now, I don't need to draw you a picture of that. We've studied these things in this DVD series. You know that a peregrine planet will run wild often within personal development. She has that Mars in Libra. And maybe it was initially set up that these migraine headache reactions were responses to social struggle. Think about that. It also can include the eyes when there is a focus on the head area seen through the sun and the moon. These are the eyes. More about that later. I know twins who have Sun, Moon, Saturn conjunction in their horoscope. These are adult people in their 70s now, who have severe eye problems their whole life. And they wear very, very thick glasses. Oh, now they've gotten the streamlined laser treatment so you don't know it, and they wear contacts and things like that. But still, it's there because there's a developmental tension focused upon the sun and the moon and Saturn. The lady of the twins has a child with Saturn opposed the sun, and Neptune ruling the 12th, where we see critical illness, and that Neptune is square the sun. Now, I don't need to show you a picture of that. The sun and the moon are heavily stressed by Saturn and Neptune. The 12th house is where we do see the resting place of critical illness. The ascendant is the health center of our being. And we're going to see that when the ruling planets of both are in jeopardy, that we have accumulated developmental deficit for sure, and we have to pay attention to it, the sooner the better. I can remember being the house guest of a family that had just been augmented by the birth of a son. And that son was probably not over a year and a half old. And they asked me to look at his horoscope, and I did. And I saw that Mars was square the sun, and that Uranus was square the moon. Now, from what I just shared with you, I knew the probability was extremely high that this baby was going to have eye problems. And very gently and tactfully, I discussed this with circumspection with the parents. About 3 years later, I was again their house guest, and in comes this little boy wearing glasses. I went to a specialist who deals with very young children, and they divined how to determine that there was vision problem. I can remember vividly with my daughter, who has Saturn opposed the sun, sitting in Germany in our home, enjoying the foreign experience, living experience, and we were learning German together, and she was 20 feet away from me in a nice big living room, and I said, "Wie viel Finger habe ich?" How many fingers do I have? And she'd say 2. Wie viele Finger habe ich? She'd say, 5. Something was wrong with her vision. We were testing for vocabulary, but what came out was Saturn opposed the Sun. I discussed this with my wife, and we took her to a specialist, eye doctor, dealing with young people, and he found out that she had vision problems. She wore glasses to this day, 50 years later. And she immediately went to the top of the class. After about a month getting used to the glasses and learning German better in a German school, it made the difference in her life. Very thick glasses. When we come to Taurus, Taurus is the throat area. Look at the glyph of Taurus. When you draw that, think of the throat. It's the chin and the throat. It involves the larynx, your vocal organs. It's ruled by Venus. Puccini, the great composer Giacomo Puccini, died of throat cancer. And his Venus retrograde, now just picture this, stay calm. His Venus was squared by Neptune. His Venus ruled his 12th and his ascendant. Now this is a directive given to us astrologically that Venus problems were critical in his life development. Isn't that interesting? Michael Douglas, so much in the news now, has been attacked by throat cancer. Now his Venus is peregrine and rules his 12th house. These are just 2 examples, but they're eloquent examples. Remember them. You understand that focus of problems now. Jack Klugman has cancer of the larynx. You can imagine the Venus condition in his horoscope. Now, Venus also rules the thyroid gland, which is in the throat. It's a large endocrine gland in the neck. It's engaged with the process of using energy, controlling proteins, interacting with other hormones. Now, Oprah Winfrey has Saturn square Venus, Pluto quindecile Venus. She has a thyroid condition. And you can often spot its in symptoms with slightly bulging, extra large opened eyes for some reason. Again, I'm not a medical doctor, but I have picked up a lot of this and I've done a lot of research on it, and we'll talk about that at the end of the DVD. Kelly Osbourne has Uranus conjunct Venus ruling the 12th. This is clear as a bell. She has a thyroid condition. You would be in consultation with her and you say, I'm not a medical doctor, but do I have your permission to discuss some of the suggestions in the horoscope? They're usually very, very appropriate. And she'll say yes. And you say, has there ever been any anxiety about your thyroid? And she'll say, yes, I take medicine for my thyroid. Okay, it's very simple, isn't it? But it becomes terribly dynamic the older you get. Or the younger you are, the more preventative you can be. We'll talk more about Venus when we get to Libra later. Now with Gemini, we talk about the upper respiratory area. Picture the lungs. That's what the glyph is showing. Lungs, lung cancer, chronic bronchitis, emphysema. Did you know that lung cancer kills more than breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colon cancer combined? Franz Kafka, the surrealistic writer, died of tuberculosis, lung problems, lung cancer. He had Uranus square his moon and Mercury in Gemini, moon ruling the 12th. Let me show you that picture of that horoscope. You're going to get a horoscope like this with 2 stellia, and you're going to say, whoa, what do I do, what do I do, what do I do? Well, the first thing you do is you see that there is developmental tension between Uranus and Mercury, the final dispositor, in Gemini. And also it is square to the Sun and the Moon here in Gemini. And the Sun rules the ascendant and the Moon rules the 12th. And he will fight a lifelong battle with lung conditions. Is that clear? Johnny Carson died of emphysema and its complications. He was diagnosed in 2002 when solar arc Neptune came to his Mercury. Transiting Neptune was square his ascendant at that time. Transiting Saturn opposed Venus, ruler of his 12th. Now there are 3 vital danger signs given by astrology for Mr. Carson. Interesting, isn't it? You can apply this to generations. Just before World War II, there was a scourge of tuberculosis in the world. And the generation that was born in the 1880s, with Pluto conjunct Neptune in Gemini, was touched off in the 1930s. When these people were 50 years old, by transiting Neptune in a mutable sign. That's all you need to know. It was squaring the situations. Then in the early 1940s, by Saturn or Uranus in transit in Gemini. The vulnerabilities were there. The arcs and transits moved into them. Now, additionally, through Mercury, we have a registration of the nervous system. And that's often cued by nail biting. Look at the nails of your clients. Wiggling of the foot while they're talking or thinking. It's asthma. Doctors cannot explain asthma, but astrology can suggest it. It's a connection with Saturn, Gemini, difficulty getting air. Think of it that way. Also with Saturn, high tension within Gemini suggests nervous skin disorders. Saturn rules the skin. And very importantly, this not yet understood disease called Parkinson's disease. This is a chronic, progressive movement disorder, Mercury. Vital nerve cells in the brain malfunction and die. Tremors, slowness of movement, rigidity in limbs and torso, postural instability. My colleague at Harvard and friend was Eric Siegel, the great author, who was also a classicist, a professor of Greek and Latin, a runner of marathons. Think of all these mercurial things. He had Mars, Quindicile, Mercury. Mercury was the final dispositor and the ruler of his 12th. And Eric, just a couple of years ago, died of Parkinson's disease. Yasser Arafat, remember the tremors at the end of his life? Saturn square Mercury, ruler of the 12th. Uranus Quindicile Mercury, nervous. Parkinson's disease. Muhammad Ali, Neptune in stress relationship with the moon ruling the 12th and with Mercury. So these formulae do hold up. Salvador Dali, Parkinson's disease, Mars conjunct Mercury, ruler of the 12th. Now I know the feeling that is happening here. You're looking into your own horoscope, as you should, and you're thinking, holy smokes, this is not easy. We have to get to know ourselves, and it's nice if a doctor helps you every 6 months or so. Cancer, the stomach, the breasts, stomach ulcers, usually with Mars involvement because of the stress and the acid. Olivia Newton-John has Uranus conjunct the moon in Cancer. All you need to hear is stress to the moon. And both of them are square to the sun, ruler of the 12th. And she developed breast cancer. And so did Shirley Temple Black with her moon in 29 Gemini at the Cancer Aries point, squared by Uranus. A client comes to my mind, Neptune opposed her moon, ruler of the 12th, has had a mastectomy because of breast cancer. Leo is given rulership of the heart. Now, former Vice President Cheney, Dick Cheney, is famous for his heart problems, among other things. Saturn is square his sun, ruler of the 12th. Uranus is square Mercury, ruler of the ascendant. And Saturn is square Pluto in Leo. Now you put that together and you know there is a vulnerability to a heart problem. Bill Clinton, 4 planets in Leo, including Saturn-Pluto conjunction, Mercury, ruling the 12th. David Bowie, has Sun Mars in the 12th with Saturn conjunct Moon Pluto in Leo. And that's opposed the ascendant. So you see the health centers are involved here. The ascendants of these people, the 12th house for critical illness. Heart problems run in the family. Every year, 785,000 people have the first heart attack. 26% of deaths are from heart failure. Now, when you have somebody in consultation and you see this developmental tension focused on the Sun or Leo, 12th ascendant, here's how I suggest you ask about that. Say, I'm not a medical doctor, but may I ask you, please, has a doctor ever found by electrocardiogram or stethoscope a congenital heart anomaly, meaning you're born with it? Congenital heart anomaly, which means unknown. And so when you say those words together, they're less accusing. Congenital heart anomaly, a heart murmur, missing a beat. If you have difficulty asking a question like that at this point, I can understand. You might precede it with, may I ask you please a research question? People will love that. Has a doctor ever found by electrocardiogram or stethoscope a congenital heart anomaly? This is how you learn, friends. If the person says no, you say, well, when was the last time you had a physical checkup? The person says, 5, 10 years ago. Have you ever had an electrocardiogram? No. You're making your point implicitly. Don't you think it fair to your family and to yourself to have a regular checkup? Very important question. Although it's a yes or no question, the answer is very powerful. And we cannot overlook that the sun and the moon, as I've said, each refer to the eyes. It doesn't matter whether it's the left eye in the male or the right eye in the female. I mean, this is all old-time stuff, and what difference does it make anyhow? A lot of people hide behind that because they can't talk about anything else more substantive. How many people do wear glasses? How many people do have developmentally stressed aspects to the sun and or the moon? A lot. 1 out of 4 people are going to die of a heart attack. Let's talk about Virgo. It's the intestines. And the Virgo concept reintroduces Mercury. Now there's a whole sub-generation born with Uranus-Pluto conjunction. That includes a lot of you. And there's a vulnerability there to difficulties with metabolic management of nutritional intake. This means your body and its systems has difficulty managing the nutrition you ingest. Nutrition problems abound. Every newspaper, every magazine talks about it. Our modern diet stinks. With the Pluto involvement there, we can expect bowel concerns. And that is strongly linked with Scorpio, as we'll see. Farrah Fawcett had Saturn quindicile Mercury, ruler of Virgo. But in her horoscope, it was the ruler of her 12th house. With Pluto conjunct that Mercury as well. And she developed intestinal cancer that focused in the rectum, Pluto. Milton Berle, the great, great comedian, had Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune all in strong tension with Mercury, along with Pluto, opposed the moon, ruler of the 12th. Now, that's not a lot of gobbledygook. That's not a lot of jargon-esque dancing. That's stuff you should be able to register and visualize in your mind now. He had Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. That's a lot of potential trouble. All in strong tension, a heavy aspect, with Mercury. And that's what we're talking about, the ruler of Virgo. And Pluto was opposed to the moon, ruler of the 12th. He developed intestinal colon cancer. Libra. Libra rules the lower back. Think of the belt line. The symbol looks like a rising or setting sun, but it also looks like a belt going around your midsection. It rules the pancreas. And it reintroduces the ruling planet, Venus. Now, who hasn't had lower back pain? Especially the 3rd and 5th lumbar vertebrae at the belt line. It can be severely, severely debilitating. It puts pressure in that area on what is called the sciatic nerve. And that sciatic nerve goes down the side of the leg. Some of us have had extreme pains like that. People with pressure on their Venus or much tension focused in Libra will undoubtedly take on lower back crises. I have Pluto opposed Mercury, and that axis is squared by Mars in Libra. Picture that. Pluto opposed Mercury squared by Mars in Libra. And I had a severe back trauma years ago, was quite paralyzed, and a neurosurgeon in Germany saved my mobility. But I've lived my whole life, adult life, with constant presence of back pain. Bo Derek has chronic back pain, debilitating. And she has Neptune, ruler of her 12th, conjunct Venus, the final dispositor. So you're starting to see what I said earlier. It's simple, but scary. Elizabeth Taylor had chronic back pain, lifelong. And she became addicted to pain-killing drugs. Her Pluto, ruling the 12th, was square Uranus-Venus. That's a Venus problem of developmental deficit. It accumulates with age. Venus rules the pancreas. Luciano Pavarotti, the great tenor, died of pancreatic cancer. He had Saturn opposed Venus and Neptune conjunct Venus. He had Venus problems. Aretha Franklin has pancreatic cancer and has Pluto quindicile, Venus, ruler of her 12th. Now, Venus also rules the kidneys and the bladder. Frank Sinatra developed bladder cancer with Saturn opposed Venus, ruler of his 12th. Hubert Humphrey developed bladder cancer, and he had Neptune conjunct his Venus. These are people born with these vulnerabilities that come out as they age in the accumulated developmental process. A 500,000 people have bladder cancer, and you never hear about it. They call themselves the forgotten cancer. But Venus doesn't forget. Here's a lady. Look at this horoscope. Here's Venus in the 12th with Neptune. A very, very powerful, powerful suggestion. You would have to ask this lady, do you have a history of back problems? Yes. Anything more in that region, like the kidneys? And when I said that to her, she said, I've had three kidney transplants. One on each side and a replacement. We'll talk more about Venus when we get on with Sagittarius. In Scorpio, we have the reproductive and alimentary organs, the genitalia, the rectum and colon, and critically, the prostate gland, uterus, ovaries. This is a tough area. Pluto is so often seen in critical disease profiles. There's simply no doubt about it. It so often signifies the end of the line. Now, astrology has just lost a prominent practitioner, an author who died of rectal cancer. His horoscope shows Pluto square the sun in Scorpio, ruling the 12th house. Comedian Milton Berle, whom I mentioned earlier, had Pluto oppose the moon, ruler of his 12th. He died of colon cancer. Merv Griffin, that wonderful, happy, jolly entertainer, had Mars opposed Pluto, ruler of his 12th, and he died of prostate cancer. So did Timothy Leary, similarly with Mars opposed Pluto, ruler of his 12th. It goes on and on. It's telling us something. It's telling us that we must understand it. That all these signs are there for warnings. General Norman Schwarzkopf survived his prostate cancer. Let me show you his horoscope. Norman Schwarzkopf had Mars and Pluto tight conjunction in the 12th. Now immediately, when you see that, You must train yourself to respond that that is a dangerous situation involving things plutonic. The prostate gland in men, bowels, things like that. Ever so much more important because it is opposed to the moon. And that moon is the ruler of the 12th. Now, I can't make it any clearer, friends. This is a very powerful situation. If he were my client 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would say you really need to have a prostate examination every 6 months or every year. And he'd say, well, I'm perfectly all right, or something. But you've done your job. Now, look at his horoscope in development. In March, mid-March of 1994, his Neptune, natally here in the second house, arced to this position at 9 Scorpio, precisely square his ascendant, the health center. At the same time, transiting Pluto was at 28 Scorpio, exactly square his sun. See that? At the same time, transiting Uranus and Neptune at 23 and 25 Capricorn were on his moon, opposing this Mars-Pluto vulnerability in the 12th house. He went to Walter Reed Hospital to have a knee checkout. Capricorn rules the knees. We'll talk about that later. But there it is. And while he was there, one of the doctors said, you know, General, you really need to have a prostate examination update. He said, all right. So he got one. Then they called him a couple of days later and said, General, you have prostate cancer. You see how that is activated? Whew. I get excited about this because I'm living these dramas with my clients. Anne Bancroft died of uterine cancer. Uranus square to Pluto, ruling the 12th and the ascendant. It was diagnosed in her when transiting Saturn opposed that Pluto. So you see the dynamism of the developmental deficits being triggered in time in the aging process. Let's go to Sagittarius. Sagittarius rules the liver, hips, and it's part of a discovery I've made of a diabetes signature. Now, the liver is the second largest organ of the body next to the skin. It filters everything that flows through our body's systems. It is a vital organ indeed. How many of you know your cholesterol level? How many of your clients know their cholesterol level? The liver makes cholesterol. It's not just what you ingest in your diet. If the Jupiter is highly charged by aspect, there is a suggestion that too much cholesterol is being created. For example, I have Sun conjunct Jupiter in the 7th house. I have Sun conjunct Jupiter. It is hyperactive. The Sun churns it on. This is why I'm known to have boundless enthusiasms. And that Sun-Jupiter conjunction has paralleled a rise in cholesterol through my entire adult life. I caught it very early. And with diet control, I brought it down over 100 points, which is considerable. But I take one pill every night, and I have for 15 years, to keep it under control, and it's perfectly normal. This is a hyperactive Jupiter. Women have a curious peak acceleration of cholesterol production right as they pass 50. We need to know that cholesterol is carried in the blood by lipoproteins. HDL, high density lipoproteins, is called the good cholesterol because they carry cholesterol away from the arteries to the liver where the body can eliminate it. HDL should be high when you get the numbers back from the doctor. LDL, low density lipoproteins, is called the bad cholesterol because it forms plaque, restricting blood flow to the heart and brain. LDL should be low. One more word, triglycerides are a type of fat in the blood that can contribute to hardening and narrowing of the arteries, making it more difficult for the blood to flow. Now, when you get a spectrum of cholesterol analysis, they're going to have overall cholesterol, HDL, LDL, and triglycerides. You become familiar with that. It's helpful when your client gives you a few numbers. Evel Knievel has had a liver transplant, and his natal horoscope shows Uranus square Jupiter. It sounds simple, and it is. It's an accumulated developmental deficit vulnerability in the liver. That's what that is. Mickey Mantle, the great baseball hitter, his liver was severely debilitated by alcohol, and he had Mars square Jupiter, ruler of his ascendant. A lady with Saturn conjunct Jupiter, the pair squared by Pluto and Mars quindicile, developed liver cancer ever so rapidly and died. Let me show you that horoscope. This was a good friend of mine. I couldn't believe it. She was a skilled astrologer. And we even had talked about it, but she didn't go for checkups. Look. Here's Saturn and Jupiter, squared by Pluto. You know there's going to be a vulnerability for a liver problem. Mars, Peregrine, going wild, dotted line, quindicile to Jupiter, Saturn. The Jupiter is terribly challenged here. Saturn challenges it. Pluto challenges it. Mars challenges it. And there you have it. She called me up and she said, I've just been diagnosed with advanced liver cancer, but I'm going to beat it. She was dead in, what, 4 weeks? Now this brings us to the juxtaposition of Jupiter and Venus. I discovered conclusively about 20 years ago, and I've tested the discovery daily, and so have my students all over the world. hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of astrologers. Jupiter in touch with Venus suggests the occurrence of diabetes in the extended family. Now, this is not saying that the person will develop diabetes. It is saying that there is a high probability of diabetes being in the person's extended family, which certainly could include the client, him or herself. You can say, may I ask you a research question, please? Sure. Are there incidences of diabetes in your extended family? Now, this is when Jupiter and Venus are making any kind of contact at all in the horoscope. Naturally, if it's a quindicile or a square or a conjunction, it is more intense, more probable. And if the person says, no, they haven't thought thoroughly enough. In your extended family, please think for a moment. Oh, yeah. My grandfather died of diabetes, etc. That's how it goes, and only experience will reveal the wealth of material that you will get from the answers to this question. Check every horoscope for that. You'll be amazed. For example, Larry King has type 2 diabetes. This means it comes about in adulthood. And he has Jupiter square Venus. Astrologer J.H. Jacobs was severely debilitated by diabetes, severely. I knew him extremely well. I was his father's astrologer, the famous Moby Dick. He had Neptune square the conjunction of Jupiter-Venus, with Jupiter ruling his 12th, and he died last week of diabetes. The reason you ask about the extended family is because there are diabetes that skip generations. It becomes a very important discussion point. Sometimes your client will say, well, I don't have it, but my mother's sister has it, and we'll name a few more. And I have a borderline concern with hypoglycemia, and my doctor is having me watch this very carefully. Now, when the astrologer also brings that up out of the blue, the person is well warned for the rest of his or her life. Look at this horoscope. This is a lady who Jupiter is in quindicile to Pluto and Venus. Her answer to me was, oh, there are so many people in my family who have diabetes. I'm scared to death. It is not our job to provide the answers to our questions. It is our job to use the question to stimulate protective, potentially fulfilling conversations with our clients. I can't say it better than that. I just can't. Our blood carries everything to where it will be used. Nice sentence. The blood seems to be ruled by Neptune, and we must be aware here of our need for further research. High or low blood pressure, concomitants of stroke and heart attacks must come into greater controlled astrological understanding. We don't know enough. I mean, I could give you examples of talking to registered nurses with prominent Neptunes, and I asked simply, do you have a specialization with blood? And they say, yes, I'm head of the blood laboratory in my hospital, or something like that. Let's talk about Capricorn. Capricorn rules the bones, the joints, the knees, osteoarthritis, the teeth. Don't forget the teeth. And examples are many, 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 many. A key point to remember is that when a part of the body is injured, like a knee or an elbow, that is where arthritis, with age, will find entrance to the body as the body ages. Please understand that. I had many injuries to my knees as a young school and college athlete. And with age, those areas were open doors to arthritis. I have had 2 knee replacements, surgeries. They work very well. My horoscope shows Pluto opposed Mercury in Capricorn. Neptune opposes Saturn, ruler of Capricorn. Teeth. Teeth are expensive. Regular dental checkups can save much grief and much money. Get a good dental insurance the older you get. Now, some of us are prone to teeth problems more than others are. And the Saturn condition in the horoscope tells the tale. You know, it's not surprising that Saturn, the Greek Kronos, rules aging. It isn't. Aquarius, the ankles and the calves. I don't have much to say about that. I really have never been aware that talking about Aquarius in terms of the part of the body ascribed to it, ankles and calves, was productive in consultations. Sometimes Uranus, ruler of Aquarius, is a powerful adverb in a diagnostic sentence dealing with the nervous system or strokes or things like that. But that's very, very subtle, and it's not really something I can talk to you about with authority. So I want to go on to Pisces, if I may. Now, when you have a problem with your feet, which is the realm of Pisces, you know it. The debilitation is critical because you stand on them all day long. They get you around. We simply cannot move where we want to go. We can't hold up the rest of our body. People who have operations on their feet are really out of commission for several months. Look at Olympic ice skating champion Kristi Yamaguchi. She has severe feet problems. She has Saturn opposed Neptune, ruler of Pisces. A client of mine, a dance instructor, has many problems with her feet, and her horoscope shows Uranus on the ascendant opposed the Sun in Pisces. Now, we've got to learn about disease and body function. On the next rainy day, let me give you a suggestion. Gather up, go to a medical center, you know, all those huge medical centers we have, which are filled with doctors' offices. go in there with a little basket and go to each specialist down the corridors and pick up those folders that are in the waiting room that tell you all about your disease. Take them. Take copies of them and bring them home and devour 1 or 2 a day. Start thinking astrologically along the lines that we're learning in this DVD. Or seek out the Mayo Clinic Family Health Book. It's about that thick. It weighs more than your brain many times over. It's a fabulous book to have. It's cleanly, clearly written. You can look up anything there and see pictures and diagrams and explanations. Become familiar with diseases and their astrological signals in order to share prevention alerts with your clients. That's a good project. I bought my daughter some years ago the Mayo Clinic Family Health Book. And she talks about it today, you know, to this day. She and her husband refer to it often. When something hurts, look it up. That's how you learn. Now, one of the most debilitating conditions in our lives is depression. More time is lost off the job because of depression than any other condition. 1 woman in 5, 1 man in 10 can expect to develop clinical depression in their life. There are reliable signals about depression. Saturn's interaction with Mercury and involvement with the 3rd house. This is the archetype of depression. Saturn interaction with Mercury, how we need to think, and the involvement with the 3rd house, which is our mindset. Now, it's a lot of other things too, as we know already, but the mindset is there. Michael Jackson, for example, his distant, pained position in life was signaled by Saturn square the moon, ruler of his 3rd and his self-worth 2nd. Additionally, there are these telltale midpoint pictures, which I'd like to show you. Neptune equals Mercury, Saturn. There's your Mercury-Saturn depression archetype. Neptune is bewilderment, speaking psychodynamically in analysis. Bewilderment enters into the mental process that is very near to depression. Together, this is a very difficult picture to manage in life. A natal, Neptune equals Mercury, Saturn. Then we have Saturn equals Neptune, Pluto. This is the presence of grief and torment. People feel grief and torment in their life. They expect it. This is the mindset of the depressive. You can say to your client at the right time, while we're having a bubbly and good time right now, I'd like to know how you handle the depression that comes upon you often, the feelings of grief and torment. And you'll see the entire consciousness go into that state. And the answers are very important. And you have to be prepared to to point your client in the direction of treatment of depression. How many books have you got in your library about depression, written by psychiatrists? How to Handle Depression is a very popular book title. Go get a few of them. Read 3 this month. And you'll be helping many, many of your clients beautifully. How about Pluto equals Saturn ascendant? This is a violent upset and deep anguish, feeling that you're being put down by others. Now, I don't need to get into how I divined the word images I'm giving to you, but they're valid. They're very, very valid, which is a redundancy. But you know, I'm saying they hold up, and they can be very helpful guides. The last one I want to share is the ascendant equals Saturn-Pluto. This is a feeling of a loss of identity. Now remember, the people around you, you go to a dinner party after church, you're going to be 40 people in the room, and 20 of them probably have been treated for clinical depression. 10 of them. 5 of them. Even if it's one, and that person comes to you as your client, and you can talk knowingly about this, guided by these signatures, you're doing your job and feeling good about it. Let me close with some general observations. Those males born in the mid-1960s with Saturn opposed Uranus-Pluto in Virgo, just feel the tension between Saturn and Pluto, Uranus on Pluto. We're talking about a Pluto challenge in men, which has got to include, number 1, the prostate, especially if it's positioned within the aging process significantly. You're not going to develop prostate cancer when you're 13 years old. But when you're over 60, they used to say, well, that's when it started. Then it was 50, and now it's younger and younger. The planets have changed. So somebody born in the mid-1960s with Saturn opposed Uranus-Pluto conjunction, they're facing up to the Saturn transit square to that in 2016 through 2018. And at the same time, at that time, transiting Neptune is in mutable Pisces until 2024. Now, what is this saying? Prostate cancer will evidence itself more and more and more with the younger male. We really must learn about diseases and their symptoms. Few of us are medical doctors. But to be the best astrologer we can be, we have to recognize the symbology of the planets as they come down to Earth within the aging process. It is incumbent upon us as astrologers helping others that we help people live longer, live better lives, live richer lives. And when we do that, our clients will be well pleased and we will be quite proud. Thank you.